Alright, and welcome back to the channel. Fortunately, not a phenomenal day yesterday. I ended up actually going 4-4 in all my bets, including NBA. NBA seems to have been saving me a lot lately. This college basketball sport is a little up and down sometimes, and yeah. But, could have been a worse day, all things considered. Oregon, just pathetic. We really thought they'd bounce back against a Nebraska team that's kind of been playing above their head, but they lost outright, which is great. Tulane, dog shit team, another terrible first half performance. Yeah, they end up almost losing that game outright. They were losing at half. Just they had more turnovers despite them being a team that should be the one turning over the ball less against a pretty mediocre team. But happens. Siena wins outright, pretty much a no sweat. Merrimack ends up winning by 2. I think they were up by 9 with like 10 minutes left, and then they just imploded. Yeah, I don't know. That team is so good defensively until they have a comfortable lead, and then they just let people do whatever they want to them. And TCU was a relatively close game, but they end up pulling away in the final few minutes. So 2-3 day could be shittier. But today we're trying something new. I'm really just focusing on model numbers and then trying to explain the model numbers based off what the model is telling me. So let's get into my favorite 5 games today. These are the games that I find are the furthest off of the official spreads. So let's get into them. All right, game number 1. We have Pitt at home versus Virginia. Now, I can fully understand why people might take Virginia in this spot. They have been playing a little bit better lately. And, they on paper aren't the worst team in the world, and maybe they are feeling a little bit of momentum here. But I still don't trust them. This Pitt team, as I mentioned before, they have the best home advantage in college basketball, and they have a top 20 offense, top 75 defense. Virginia outside the top 100 in both of those, despite having an easier schedule than Pitt. It just doesn't feel like a good spot for this Virginia team. On paper, Virginia does have a favorable matchup here against a Pittsburgh team that does struggle to defend anything but the paint. This Virginia team is not very big, and they mostly shoot mid-range 3-point shots, where they are decent teams. They're top 50 in 3-point shooting against out of top 200 Pittsburgh defense, and they are an 80th in mid-range percentage against a bottom 200 Pittsburgh mid-range defense. But I do think that they're still going to struggle. Mostly the fact that this Pittsburgh environment at home is extremely hard to play in. And shooting your 3s and 2s, sure, you might have open looks, but again, I don't really trust this Virginia team in this environment. Now, if you look specifically at the situational trends at home, Pitt is still a fantastic team. They're 8-4 against the spread at home. Virginia, they're still 2-4 as road dogs. If you look at their most recent games, we're getting Pitt here in a solid bounce back spot after losing on the road to Wake Forest. And Virginia, despite having been playing better lately, they're still coming off a loss against a team outside the top 100 against Virginia Tech in their own home court. They beat a terrible Miami team. I don't know why people are saying that's a bounce back spot. This Miami team is the worst team, quite literally, I've ever seen in this ACC. They are playing a high school team. And at home, they beat a Boston College team. A Boston College team that also looks terrible this year. They're barely a top 200 team. So I still don't believe it. I don't think they're back, this Virginia team. Yeah, they have 2 wins, but they're still just beating terrible teams when they do find some success. And this Pitt team, they've lost 5 of their last 7, but they've been good teams. They lost to Duke, Florida State, Clemson, Louisville, North Carolina. They beat by 8. Syracuse, they beat by 4. I still think in this home environment, this is a spot where I'm always just going to back Pitt. Number 1 home advantage in college basketball. They're a top 15 team when they're playing at home. Virginia, not even a top 150 team when they're playing on the road. And when they have to step up in competition, they really do fail. They're really bad against basically any team in the top 50. Yeah, I don't know. I can see the world where you might think that Virginia might be back. They're bouncing back. Uh, Still, I don't see it. I think Pitt at home here in a bounce back spot is going to crush this really, really bad Virginia team. Uh, yeah, give me Pitt at home. Game number 2, we have Lehigh at home versus Colgate. Now, I didn't really love this game last night, but now that the line's moved to 4.5, I think it's a little bit too much to lay with the Colgate team on the road. Lehigh, they're not, they're nothing special. They're a pretty shitty team, borderline top 300 team. And Colgate is a borderline top 200 team. So Colgate is, I'm not saying they're the worst team, they're definitely the better team. But Lehigh's played pretty well at home. And this Lehigh team, they like to shoot mid-range and three-point shots. These are the two shots that Colgate doesn't defend well. Colgate is not a fantastic defensive team. And I think at home, Lehigh will find some success to keep this game close. Colgate, they're also going to find success offensively. They shoot a lot, very similarly to this Lehigh team. They shoot a lot of threes. But Lehigh defends the three. Out of everything they do defend poorly, the three is the one thing that they actually manage to successfully defend. And I think if both these teams are hucking up threes and mid-range shots, I think Colgate is going to find a little bit of struggles here, finding offensive success. Colgate also kind of relies on getting points off steals. Lehigh takes care of the ball. They're a top 50 team in turnovers. So I do think schedule strength-wise, Colgate's played a slightly harder schedule. I just think this number is a little bit too big. I still think Colgate wins this one, but I think Lehigh is able to keep it at least relatively close at home. If you look at the power ratings between these two teams, this Lehigh team has played pretty good at home. They have a borderline top 100 home advantage. Colgate has been playing better on the road as well. They're the best road team, if you want to call it that, in the Patriot League. But I think home advantage still leads a little bit to Lehigh. Regression-wise, Lehigh's due for some positive regression. Colgate due for some negative regression. And this Colgate team doesn't really show up against bad teams. If you look at all of their biggest performances, it's against top 50 teams. And when they have to play dogs, they really don't step up nearly at the same level. If you're looking at a dual game log here, Lehigh, they won 2 of their last 3. Colgate's lost their last 3 games. I think Colgate's kind of coming back to reality here. And this Colgate team, they've beaten 2 mediocre teams, but they absolutely blew out Lafayette, who's not a good team, but this Lehigh team can score. And I think they're starting to get a little more confidence. They're starting to gel a little bit. They've covered 3 of the last 4 in the head-to-head since 2024. They haven't been that bad. So, give me Lehigh at home to cover this 4.5 home underdog number. Heading on to game number 3, we have Bethune Cookman at home versus Alabama A&M. Now, this line has been oddly moving. I think it started at 8.5, and I still liked it, and now it's moved to 6.5. I think this is a great spot for a pretty solid Bethune Cookman team. They played a much harder schedule. Alabama A&M's played the 331st hardest schedule, and Bethune Cookman has played a top 200 schedule strength, and they've just been the better team in general. This is a Alabama team that's ranked outside of the top 350. They're not a very good team. If you look at what they do well, they're an okay team at stealing the ball and getting boards, but again, they've played such bad teams that I think those numbers are heavily inflated. It's easier to steal the ball away from really bad players. So Bethune Cookman, they're not by any means a fantastic team, especially offensively, but I think they are going to find some success getting points off steals against an Alabama and A&M team that does not take care of the ball. Offensively, Alabama A&M is they're nothing crazy by any means. I really don't think that they're going to be able to stop them, even though they do have some favorable matchups and where Bethune likes to shoot. I think Bethune is going to find a lot of success in getting a ton of free throws this game against an Alabama A&M team that is ranked 355th in allowing free throws, and that's against bad teams. So Bethune, they're not really a great free throw shooting team. They shoot it at 67%, which is not phenomenal by any means, but I do think they're just going to get a bunch of free points. And if you look on the other side, this Alabama A&M team, again, offensively, they're going to struggle. This is a solid Bethune defense, top 164th. The only thing that they don't defend well is the mid-range shot. And again, Alabama A&M, they're ranked 357th in offensive efficiency. The only thing that they do okay is get boards, and maybe they're going to find a little bit of success here, but I think 6.5 is a little bit of too much disrespect for a decent Bethune-Cookman team that typically does show up in these moments. Look at the situational trends. As home favorites, Bethune-Cookman is 3-1 against the spread, and Alabama A&M, guess what? They're 0-8 against the spread as away underdogs. I think this line moving is throwing me off a little bit, if I'm being honest. Makes me kind of curious, but Bethune, they've won their last 4 games playing at home. They beat Alabama State by 3, a team that I think is slightly better than Alabama A&M. And on the other side, this Alabama A&M people, they lost 4 in a row, and in all 4 of those games, they got blown out. Yes, they played some better teams, but still, they lost to Jackson State, a terrible team, by 10. They lost to Florida A&M by 16. They lost to Alcorn State by 10. They got blown out by Georgia, obviously. But yeah, I think despite the fact that Alabama A&M has kind of owned this head-to-head, I think this is the year that Bethune is the slightly better team. We're getting them at an extremely fair number, given how these two teams are performing. Bethune-Cookman, not really a fantastic team, but they do have a top 150 home advantage. They've been playing slightly better at home. Alabama A&M is playing ranked 362 when they're playing on the road. They have been atrocious. I just think this is a fantastic spot to back a Bethune-Cookman team. And I don't think regression is going to hit too hard in this game, despite the fact that both teams are due for opposite regression. So, I think Cookman at home as short 6.5 point home favorites. All right, game number 4, we have SFPA heading on the road to play New Orleans. Now, originally I didn't want to take this because the line was only 4.5, but this line has moved all the way to 8.5. Do I think SFPA is the better team? Absolutely. But I feel like this number is a little bit disrespectful. Yes, New Orleans has not played well at home. SFPA has played much better on the road. But this SFPA team, they've been playing worse as of late. The last 5, they're not even a top 300 team. And yes, this New Orleans team still sucks. But if you look at who they played, this SFPA team has played a pretty easy schedule, 275th easiest schedule. And New Orleans has played the 128th hardest schedule. It just feels like a weird number, just considering how many, sure, the stats don't look good for New Orleans, but they've also played really hard teams this year. And one thing that they do really well, despite playing really hard teams, is they're an extremely aggressive defensive team, and they're gonna find points off steals here against a SFPA team that is ranked 341st in giving up points off steals. New Orleans is a top 75 team. They don't do anything else well, but they shoot a lot of free throws, and they'll play aggressive and get points off steals. And I think that to me is enough here to back them as a significant home dog. If you look at where SFPA likes to shoot, they're kind of a mid-range team. If you know me well enough, I think the mid-range is the worst shot to take. They're going to get some points off second chance opportunities. But again, whenever I look at massive schedule strength discrepancies like this, all I can think about is just how inflated these two numbers are on either side of the team. Yes, New Orleans is not a good team, but SFPA is not putting up incredible numbers, especially offensively. They're still a ranked 353rd offensive team. They're really only known for their defense, and I don't think that we're giving them a little bit too much credit here for an offensive team that doesn't really do anything well. So I think New Orleans is going to have some enjoyment playing a significantly easier team than who they played. If you look at the most recent teams they both played, SFPA, they've played awful teams. Every time they have to step up in competition, they got blown out by Nicole's, they got blown out by McNeese. They lost at home to some top 300, borderline bottom 300 teams. The hardest teams they've had to play, they've gotten shit on. This New Orleans team, they got blown out by every good team they've played as well. They went through the ringer, which has completely imploded their stats, in my opinion. They had to play Iowa, then they had to play Texas, then they had to play LSU, then they had to play McNeese, then they had to play Vanderbilt. They had played Kansas State at the beginning of the year. They had to play Troy. They had to play Tulane. And now that they're starting to play some bad teams, yes, they still haven't been great, But still, they beat a Lamar team on the road by 6. They beat a Texas A&M Commerce team by 11 on the road. I don't know. I think this is a little bit disrespectful, in my opinion. They beat a Lamar team that just beat SFPA, and now you're giving them 8.5 points at home. Yeah, give me New Orleans here. Yeah, as home underdogs, they're 0-6 against the spread. I get it. But they've had to play some really hard teams at home that just completely crushed them. And SFPA is only 1-0 as away favorites. I still don't trust them in any capacity. Yeah, I don't know. After a loss, SFPA is 1-7 against the spread, or 2-7 against the spread. And yeah, we're getting them off a loss here. So I think this number has grown way too big. Do I think New Orleans is terrible? Yes, but 8.5 is way too much disrespect given the schedule strength discrepancy. So give me New Orleans here to cover this 8.5 home dog number. All right, and in the final game, we have Weber State versus Northern Arizona. Now, NIU on paper, obviously a much better team. They have the better record. They're 13-9. Weber State is 8-15 in the Big Sky, but Weber State has had to play much harder teams. They have the 181st hardest schedule, and Northern Arizona has played the 324th hardest schedule. And I do think that does reflect their record a lot more than it does Weber State. Now, NIU, they've been playing well. They have all this momentum coming into this matchup. But Weber State has actually owned this head-to-head. Up until the win a month ago that NIU had over Weber State had won the last 9 matchups, heading all the way back to 2019. I think Weber State, in a revenge spot at home, is going to be motivated to step up against an NIU team that they're familiar with. At least the coaching is. They know kind of how to beat them. They've had a month to kind of dwell in the loss, and it was a close game. Weber State still covered that game where they were on the road against Northern Arizona. I think they match up well, and I think Weber's going to find some success, especially against an NAU team that does foul quite a lot. And they foul really bad teams, so I think Weber State's going to get to the line a ton this game. And offensively, Weber State is not a terrible defensive team. If you look at where NIU likes to shoot, they kind of shoot everywhere. There's not a shot that they like to shoot that much. But Weber State's still a top 100 mid-range defense. I think they have a favorable matchup almost everywhere defensively, except for the three-point, where NIU is already a terrible three-point shooting team, 260th in the nation, and they played bad teams, bad defenses. I think this is going to be a step up here for an NIU team that's heading on the road here after a loss. And this Weber State team, they are very similar. They like to shoot everything. They don't shoot anything very well. But they're going to find some success. I think that this NIU team is a significantly average defense, 250th in the nation. But I think all the free points that Weber's going to get from the free throw line is going to be the difference here that allows them to win this game. We're getting them in a really low spot. They've been playing really poorly. We're getting NAU in a high. They're playing really well. But now we have a revenge angle against a Weber State team that I do think on paper is due for a lot of positive regression. Northern Arizona due for some negative regression. And this Weber State team has the 81st best home advantage in college basketball. And NAU has been playing a lot worse on the road. They drop about 30 points in the power ratings when they're on the road versus at home. They're a consistent team, but I don't know. I'm looking at these numbers, and I think there's a good chance that Weber State can win this game. So give me Weber State at home to win this revenge game against Northern Arizona. All right, and now I'm going to start kind of introducing some totals. I think I've been testing totals in the background, and they've been doing decently well. And kind of just looking for trends where teams are kind of getting bigger numbers than they probably should. First one, we got Morgan State at Delaware State. On paper, these two teams are not, offensive powerhouses by any means. But they both play at a ridiculous pace, and their kind of only claim to fame is that they do have some offensive success. They don't play defense well. They're both, Morgan State ranked 353rd in defense efficiency. Delaware State ranked 279th in defense efficiency. And if you look at where Morgan State kind of likes to shoot, I think they're going to find some success here. Again, these are two teams that are not really that great. But if you look at where Morgan State shoots, they only shoot mid-range shots. And they have the 55th best mid-range percentage. and Delaware State is ranked 343rd against defending the mid-range. So Morgan State's going to find success, and of course Delaware State's going to find success because Morgan State is, one of the worst defenses in all of college basketball. I think we're getting two fast-paced teams, two bad defensive teams, two offenses that are going to find some success. I think this number is a little bit too low at 156. I think we're going to see an 80, both teams scoring in the 80s today. So give me the over at 156.5. And the second game, we got Charleston at William & Mary. Very similar spot here. I still think we're going to see 80s, but I think they're going to be low 80s. We have two extremely fast-paced teams, both top 20 in pace. But again, I don't think this Charleston team has been playing very well on the road historically. And this William & Mary team, they're not a very good defensive team by any means. But they're also not a great offensive team either. I think Charleston's going to lock them up where they typically enjoy shooting. If you look at where William & Mary typically take their shots, they like to take threes. They like to take everything, right? And mid-range and threes are going to struggle, and they're pretty much only going to have to shoot near basket. And I do find that near basket shots typically aren't going to be a problem for this Charleston team that I think has been dealing with bigger teams well lately. On the other side, Charleston, they have been really bad. Like, offensively, they have been struggling. And again, they mostly like to shoot mid-range and threes, and they're going to find some success offensively this game. Of course they are. But they're on the road, where they've been, doing significantly worse. And this Charleston team, they are an over team. Like, if you look at their situational trends, if you look at their over-unders, they are 8-2 on the over when they're at home. But on the road, they're 2-5. And very similarly, CWM, they're 6-4 as an away team to overs, but they're 3-4 as the home team. So I think we're getting two teams here that are historically over teams, but are historically under teams on the road. And now they're playing against each other. Both of these teams are due for negative regression. We're getting them both. One team off of a really, really bad loss where they only scored 55 points. And we're getting another team that only scored, they historically shoot out these bottom 300 teams, but they only put up 81 against a pretty shitty Stony Brook team. I think this is a great spot for an under 165. I think the number has risen a little bit too much. I think we're looking at 161, 162 kind of total kind of game. So, those are my 7 bets that I'm going to be betting in college basketball tomorrow. If you're curious what I'm doing in the NBA, I am on a really good NBA streak. I'm 12-2 against the spread in overs and totals and spreads. I had 2 losses, but both were because of last-minute game-time decisions. I lost the Spurs game where Wemby was a game-time decision and he didn't end up playing. And I lost another game where I had Timberwolves minus 13.5 and last-minute Anthony Edwards didn't play. So, when shit's happening well, I think NBA's been going well. So maybe I'll start making videos on NBA. But otherwise, you can see my bolded NBA bets on the spreadsheet in the description. Hopefully we can start getting back in the win column here. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate all the subscribes. Means a lot. And I will see you guys tomorrow.